The boardroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that follows a successful presentation or a difficult question. This silence felt heavy, pressing against the walls, daring someone to speak first. Rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle. Beyond the glass, cranes towered above half-finished skyscrapers, monuments to ambition and wealth. Normally, I love this view. Every building reminded me why I became an architect in the first place. Today, I couldn't even look at it. Instead, my eyes stayed fixed on the polished mahogany conference table as my father delivered his verdict. "You are suspended for 2 weeks without pay." His voice was calm, deliberate, almost rehearsed. "The reason," he continued, "is undermining your brother's authority in front of a client." Across the table, Tristan leaned back comfortably in his leather chair. His tailored designer suit probably cost more than some of our junior architects earned in months. He smiled. Not with satisfaction, with victory. He expected me to argue, to defend myself, maybe even beg. Instead, I took a slow breath. For years, I had imagined this exact moment playing out differently. I thought I would finally lose my temper and expose everything. Every lie, every stolen project, every shortcut Tristan had taken while taking credit for my work. But standing there, something unexpected happened. I felt nothing. Not anger, not fear, just clarity. The blueprints spread across the table caught my attention. They represented a $25 million luxury estate overlooking Puget Sound, designed for one of the biggest technology investors on the West Coast. Every calculation, every structural detail, every engineering solution, I had created them. Yet Tristan's name appeared proudly across the title page as lead visionary. That wasn't new. For nearly a decade, I had quietly watched my work become someone else's achievement. This time was simply the last time. I looked at my father. Richard Hawthorne had built one of Seattle's most successful real estate development companies. Employees admired him. Investors trusted him. Newspapers praised him as a visionary entrepreneur. At home, he ruled differently. Respect wasn't earned. It was assigned. And Tristan had been born with it. "Do you have anything to say?" Richard asked. I looked from him to my brother. Then I simply answered, "All right." The room became even quieter. They mistook my calmness for surrender. It wasn't. It was freedom. People often assume toxic families are built on shouting. Mine wasn't. It was built on comparison. Growing up, Tristan was the future of the family. I was the backup plan. Every holiday dinner followed the same script. My father would proudly tell relatives about Tristan's newest business opportunity, his golf scores, his expensive vacations, or another promotion waiting just around the corner. No one mentioned that he'd changed universities twice after failing multiple programs. No one mentioned that half his business ideas disappeared after a month. Reality never mattered. Presentation did. When the conversation finally reached me, Dad usually smiled politely. "Elias keeps everything running behind the scenes." Behind the scenes. That was my place. Invisible, useful, replaceable. My mother perfected the system. Unlike my father, she rarely raised her voice. She didn't have to. Whenever Tristan took credit for something I'd done, and it happened often, she'd gently pull me aside. "You know your brother struggles with confidence." She always said it softly, almost lovingly. "You're gifted, Elias. You can create another design. Don't make this into a family conflict." At 12 years old, I believed her. At 22, I questioned it. At 34, I finally understood. It had never been about protecting Tristan. It had been about protecting the illusion. Because if people discovered that the company's golden heir couldn't actually deliver results, the carefully crafted family image would collapse. So, I became the engine that nobody acknowledged. I convinced myself that hard work would eventually earn respect. It never does in a system designed to exploit it. My office became my sanctuary. While everyone else networked at expensive restaurants or country clubs, I stayed late. Some nights I worked until sunrise. I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. I simply loved solving impossible engineering problems. That obsession eventually led to my greatest achievement, the Terralock modular structural system. It wasn't just another construction method. It reduced build times dramatically, lowered material costs, improved seismic resistance, increased energy efficiency. For luxury developments in the Pacific Northwest, it changed everything. Clients loved it. Investors loved it. My father loved the profits it generated. Tristan loved presenting it during client meetings as if he'd invented it himself. Only I understood what it had cost. Years of failed prototypes. Thousands of calculations. Weekends sacrificed. Relationships neglected. Entire nights spent staring at computer models until sunrise. No applause. No recognition. Just another innovation quietly absorbed into the family business. Or so they believed. Because while everyone assumed the company owned Terralock, they were wrong. 5 years earlier, I had created a separate legal entity. Every patent, every licensing agreement, every piece of intellectual property, registered under my own company, not theirs. I never mentioned it, not because I planned revenge, because I understood my family. Deep down, I knew there would come a day when they decide I was no longer useful. When that day arrived, I intended to leave with everything that actually mattered. The disaster started 3 days before my suspension. Tristan had landed what he proudly called the deal of the decade. Arthur Vance, a billionaire entrepreneur. One custom oceanfront estate. $25 million. There was only one problem. To secure the contract, Tristan promised delivery in 90 days. 90. I reread the agreement 3 times. Surely it had to be a typo. It wasn't. Concrete alone required almost a month to cure properly. The custom structural glass came from Germany, with a lead time exceeding 3 months. Environmental approvals near the cliffside property would take weeks. Every professional in the industry knew this. The schedule wasn't ambitious. It was impossible. Failure would trigger enormous financial penalties. Instead of panicking, I did what I'd always done. I built a solution. I analyzed supplier timelines, permit schedules, weather risks, engineering constraints, labor availability. Then I created an aggressive but realistic 10-month construction schedule. I attached every supporting calculation. Finally, I emailed the revised timeline to Arthur Vance. Richard and Tristan were copied. There was no emotion. Only facts. 10 minutes later, my office door slammed open. Tristan stormed inside. His face burned red with anger. What did you do? I corrected the timeline. You embarrassed me. I prevented a lawsuit. You made me look incompetent. I stared at him. You promised something that can't physically happen. He slammed both hands onto my desk. It's just a house. No, I replied quietly. It's engineering. Before he could answer, Richard entered. Relief washed over me. Surely the CEO would understand. Surely business would matter more than pride. I couldn't have been more wrong. Richard folded his arms. You've crossed a line. I corrected an impossible schedule. You undermined your brother. I protected the company. You embarrassed leadership. Leadership. Interesting choice of word. Because leadership wasn't what Tristan offered. He offered confidence. Confidence unsupported by competence. Richard continued. Growth requires vision. It also requires physics. His expression hardened. Your negativity is holding this company back. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. A message from my mother. Please stop humiliating your brother. Fix the numbers. We're family. Fix the numbers. As though mathematics negotiated. As though gravity accepted compromise. As though concrete cured faster because someone wanted higher profits. Then came the punishment. 2 weeks. Without pay. Suspended. Not because I endangered the company. Because I embarrassed the wrong person. I looked around my office after they left. Awards covered one wall. Degrees covered another. Every accomplishment represented years of effort. Yet none of them had protected me. I sat down at my computer, intending to save my project files before leaving. The screen blinked. My architectural software closed instantly. A gray notification appeared. Access denied. Your credentials have been revoked by system administrator. I stared at the monitor. Richard hadn't waited. He had already locked me out of every company system. He believed he was demonstrating authority. Instead, he had just made the biggest legal mistake of his career. Slowly, I leaned back in my chair. For the first time all day, I smiled. Not because I'd won, because the game had finally become fair. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. For years, mornings had begun the same way, with a knot in my stomach and the quiet dread of walking back into a workplace where I was indispensable but never appreciated. That feeling was gone. In its place was something unfamiliar. Peace. I dressed with unusual care, choosing a navy suit I hadn't worn in years. I'd bought it after completing my first major commercial project, but it had stayed in the back of my closet because my father disliked it whenever I looked more polished than Tristan. That no longer mattered. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the exhausted project director who had spent years carrying someone else's empire. I saw a man finally taking ownership of his own future. Instead of driving to the employee garage, I parked in the visitor section directly outside the headquarters. My suspension was barely 24 hours old, but I wasn't there to return to work. I was there to end it. Inside my leather portfolio were 3 documents. My formal resignation, a legal notice invoking the constructive dismissal clause in my employment contract, and a package of supporting evidence prepared by my attorney the night before. I entered the lobby just after 9. Helen, the receptionist, looked up from her desk with visible confusion. "Elias," she asked quietly, "your access card was deactivated yesterday." "I know. Should I notify Mr. Hawthorne?" I smiled politely. "No. It won't be necessary." She hesitated, then nodded. I walked past the elevators and headed straight toward the executive boardroom. Through the frosted glass, I could make out the silhouettes inside. Richard, Tristan, Marcus, the company's senior legal counsel. The weekly executive meeting had already begun. Perfect. I opened the door without knocking. Every conversation stopped. Richard looked up first. His expression hardened immediately. "I thought I made myself perfectly clear yesterday." "You did. Then why are you here?" "I came to finish the conversation." Tristan laughed. "What happened? Suspension get lonely already?" Ignoring him, I walked calmly to the center of the room. My portfolio rested softly on the polished table. "I won't take much of your time," I said. Richard crossed his arms. "You've got 30 seconds. I unzipped the portfolio and removed a single envelope. Instead of handing it to my father, I slid it across the table toward Marcus. "I am formally resigning from Hawthorne Development, effective immediately." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Richard leaned back and laughed. "You can't resign." "I just did." "You're suspended." "Exactly." He shook his head as though speaking to a stubborn child. "You'll serve your suspension, apologize, and return to work." "I'm afraid that won't be happening." Marcus finally opened the envelope. His expression changed almost instantly. His eyes moved slowly across each page before returning to me. "Elias." I nodded. "Please continue reading." Richard frowned. "What exactly is this?" Marcus adjusted his glasses. "It's a notice invoking the constructive dismissal provision in Mr. Hawthorne's executive employment agreement." Richard laughed again. Only this time, the confidence sounded forced. "Constructive dismissal? Don't be ridiculous." He looked directly at me. "I didn't fire you." "No," I replied evenly. "You only suspended me without pay, publicly stripped my authority, revoked my access to company systems while I was still employed, and prevented me from performing the duties required under my contract." I paused. "The law considers that something very different." Marcus slowly cleared his throat. "Richard." "Not now." "No, Richard, you should hear this." The room became noticeably quieter. Marcus continued reading.